All right, y'all. How y'all doing? How y'all feeling? Gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. So let's get into it. Mind-body connection. I do have notes. I got some notes just to keep me from digressing. And so, mind-body connection, right? I've been talking about this since I got on the internet, mind-body connection. And what I found is that, Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine has correlated emotions to particular organs. And I didn't know this until recently when I even started studying the spleen. I've studied the mind-body connection through like the school of mystery, the school of the unseen. The ancestor set me down and was like, girl, you're finna learn this. And so the Chinese have connected worry and anxiety to the spleen. But in my own personal studies, I've also added depression. But when I was looking at it, I'm like, okay, so that's very general. We have depression, we have anxiety, we have, worry. But what is underneath that? What are the thoughts underneath that, right? In connection to the spleen. And so I found that feelings of being ignored, feelings of being forgotten about, feelings of like I'm easily replaced, I'm not valued, you're overseen or you're overlooked. And again, this could be you yourself individually, but this could also be, you as a person. It could be your gifts, it can be your talents, it can be your opinions, your ideas. Like you just go, you're unseen and unheard, right? And so when we think about this in the mind-body connection, we first again need to remember what is the mind-body connection. And so the mind-body connection is basically communication, a relationship between the mind and the body and the body and the mind, with the body being a prophetic tool to what is happening 9 times out of 10 on the subconscious level. Subconscious meaning hidden. Like we don't know what's happening. We don't know what's there. It's hidden from us, but it affects our mood. It affects our behaviors. It affects our health. And so if you think about it, 9 times out of 10, if you live in the West, do you know anything about your spleen? Absolutely not. It's not an organ. Present day, I'm 44. Over the past 40 years, I ain't never heard much about a spleen. But in my research, I found that 17th century and maybe even further back, it was some communication about the spleen, even down to the spleen being included in some comedies where people are like, oh, I laughed so hard I almost bust the spleen. But other than that, it's not been a lot of hype around the spleen. And again, as time went on, the spleen has gotten less and less attention in the West, right? In the East, it's completely different. And so again, in my school of mystery, when they set my ass down and said, hey, you're finna learn this, I've learned that it is no part of the body that is not vital. So whether it's our eyelash or the crust in between our toes, they all have a purpose and they all have a job. Now, in a nutshell, the spleen job is to filter and refine our blood. It is also in charge of storing our blood. Like if you ever seen a picture of the spleen, it's like a little ball looking thingy, like a little sack, right? And so let's think about that for a second. What is the richest element in our body? Some people may say it's the bone marrow. I do not think it's the bone marrow. I think the richest part of our body is our blood. And when you think about an organ that is in charge of filtering and refining and holding our blood, right? Our blood is our money. Our blood, because it's our money, because our blood is our health. If we have healthy blood, we have healthy body. So if our blood is our health, our blood is our money. And if our blood is our money, then the spleen is our money bag, right? It's our bag, right? And we want to take care of this bag. And so let's even go a little more to the left a little bit. The spleen is the only organ that could replicate itself numerous times, unlimited times inside of the human body. Other organs can be grown back over time, but the spleen is the only organ that if it's hit or damaged and the blood shoots out of it and the blood vessels pull together, it can grow another one and another one and another one. And this is documented in Western medicine. Cut a person open, they may have 5 spleens if the spleen was injured. And so that to me by itself just makes the spleen not a throwaway organ, or not an organ that should be forgotten. It is an organ that we should pay attention to. But again, Western medicine does not pay attention to the spleen. And you have to think about, when you don't pay attention to a particular part of the body, but all of these other organs get attention, what signal are you sending unconsciously to your mind and to your body, right? What are you sending? And what happens when we don't pay attention to, or we forget about anything, right? And so if you think about it for a second mentally, well, I've never really thought about, my spleen. I never really thought about that organ. And so collectively over centuries, we as a whole have just ignored our powerhouse, our money bag. And so let's even think about for a second, if we are ignoring this organ, how does this show up again in our emotional health, physical health, and mental health? Number one, when we ignore the spleen, we ignore our vitality. And we forget about the spleen, depression comes in, loss of appetite comes in, poor digestion comes in, feelings of hopelessness comes in. When we think of the organ as being not important, we lose our joy. We have blood sugar imbalances, right? You have to think about the spleen as like the very intricate part of like getting an oil change. It may be these little bitty holes that's off to the side, but if you don't pay attention to that hose over time, it begins to basically dry rot, break, and crack open because you're not giving it any attention. It's showing up. So are we having feelings of like, oh, I don't feel seen, I don't feel worthy enough, I don't feel heard, I'm overlooked, I'm not valued? And is that showing up as anxiety, fear of the future? Is that showing up as depression? Is that showing up as worry? Like, oh, I'm never going to sell a painting, or I'm never going to get my business off of the ground. And then how is that showing up in the physical body? Is it showing up as a blood sugar imbalance? Is it showing up as cold hand and cold feet? Is it showing up as you just cannot digest your food because you're not digesting life? How is it showing up in your relationships? In your relationships, do you attract relationships that are vertical, where you are at the top and everybody else is at the bottom, or vice versa, where you're at the bottom and you put people on a pedestal? Does it show up that way? Does it show up in your sexual health, where you use your sexuality to control, where you use your sexuality to overpower, where you use your sexuality to manipulate because your sex is so good, like you ain't gonna forget me, right? How does this show up in your life in the mind-body connection? You have to figure that out for yourself. But here's the solution. The solution is, think about it again. Let's put it this way, because I want to make it concrete. So if you ignore your hair, but then you start giving it attention by putting it oil on it and getting a haircut and washing it, it comes back to life. You become more vital, it's vibrant. Same thing with your fingernails, same thing with your liver. The spleen is no different. If you begin to, and what are those things that you're doing? You're giving it love, right? If your elbow is ashy and you start loving up on it and putting some grease on it, right? It begins to shine. No different than your spleen. What does your spleen need? First, it needs attention. And to give the spleen attention, you're just going to give it some warm foods. You're going to give it some ginger. You're going to say, here, spleen. You're going to give it some astragalus root. You're going to say, here, spleen. And it's a host of other herbs that you can give it. But more importantly, you give it attention by just acknowledging, like, okay, you're here. You're with me. You've been doing this job for quite a long time. I have not acknowledged you, but I am acknowledging you today. And today, we go into the herbal store and we get in some ginger tea because spleen, I fucks with you, right? Basically, you're just going to give your spleen some self-love, right? And you'll begin to see the more you love yourself, those feelings of anxiety and worry and not being valued and not being heard, it goes away. And so does those other deficiencies. And I'm speaking from, I don't have a spleen issue right now, but I do got another issue because I was not loving my blood. I wasn't loving her. But now I am. So that was long. I hope y'all took notes. Because I don't know when I'm going to make another one. Because I'm writing another book.